When Pepi II, the pharaoh who ruled for nearly a century, died, Egypt was left without a strong successor capable of maintaining a centralized state. After more than 90 years under a weak and aging ruler, the royal court had decayed, power had fragmented, and his death around 2181 BC created a massive power vacuum. This marked the beginning of the first intermediate period, the first dark age in Egypt's history. In this context, the nomarchs, provincial governors originally promoted during the reigns of Pepi I and Pepi II, had now become little kings in their own territories. They ruled over land, collected taxes, and even maintained their own armies. Memphis, the former capital, fell into decline, while powerful local families in Upper and Lower Egypt began to rise. Society was in crisis not only politically, but also environmentally. Prolonged droughts, the Nile failed to flood regularly, fields dried up, and peasants starved. Ancient texts describe scenes where the poor became rich and the rich were ruined. A world turned upside down, where Ma'at, the divine order and foundation of the Egyptian worldview, was shaken. Politically, the country was divided in two. In the north, the kings of the 9th and 10th dynasties, based in Heracleopolis Magna, claimed the title of pharaoh, but their power was limited and they controlled mostly Lower Egypt. In the south, a family based in Thebes gradually rose in strength, found in the early 11th dynasty, proclaiming their own kingship and slowly expanding their influence along the Nile Valley. From this point onward, Egypt entered a period of dual kingship, with two rival dynasties existing simultaneously, competing through diplomacy and military campaigns. Religion also underwent profound changes. As the pharaoh's power was no longer absolute, beliefs about the afterlife began to shift. Previously, immortality had been a near-exclusive privilege of the king, but now, commoners began to believe that they too could attain eternal life. This is evidenced by the emergence of the coffin text, a body of funerary spells and rituals extending beyond the royal family to include nobles and the wealthy. Significantly, the god Osiris, symbol of death and rebirth, gradually replaced Ra as the central figure of worship. For over a century, Egypt persisted in a state of fragmentation, with Heracleopolis controlling the north and Thebes rising as a southern power. The climax of this conflict came around 2055 BC, when Pharaoh Menhotep II of Thebes launched a military campaign, defeated Heracleopolis, and reunified Egypt. This event ended the first intermediate period and ushered in the Middle Kingdom, an era of revival and renewed stability. After more than a century of fragmentation, Egypt was once again reunified under the reign of Menhotep II, 2055 to 2004 BC. This king, who hailed from Thebes, defeated his northern rival from Heracleopolis, ending the era of dual dynasties and ushering in a new age, the Middle Kingdom. To his people, he was the pharaoh who restored Ma'at, the cosmic order, bringing light after a long night of chaos. Menhotep II was not only a warrior, but also a pioneer of new funerary styles. His tomb at Deir el-Bahari, on the west bank of Thebes, combined mortuary temple and tomb, a precursor to grand funerary complexes later built in the Valley of the Kings. For this, posterity remembers him as the Pharaoh of Unification. He was succeeded by his son Menhotep III, 2004 to 1992 BC. While his father rebuilt Egypt with the sword, Menhotep III expanded its influence through trade and diplomacy. He launched expeditions to Punt, bringing back incense, exotic woods, and animal skins, and re-established relations with Byblos and Nubia. During his reign, Thebes flourished as a religious center, where temples began to rise in honor of Ammonius, the deity who would become the central figure of Egyptian religion for centuries to come. Then came the reign of Menhotep IV, 1992 to 1985 BC, a king whose name faded into the shadows of history. Very few records about him remain, and it is likely that true power had already shifted to his vizier, Amenemhat, a powerful figure in the royal court. Upon Menhotep IV's death, the royal line of Thebes ended, giving way to a new dynasty founded by Amenemhat. This political shift not only launched Dynasty 12, but also ushered in the golden age of the Middle Kingdom. The end of Dynasty 11 paved the way for a new figure, Amenemhat I, 1985 to 1955 BCE. Originally a vizier and of non-royal blood, Amenemhat seized power and founded Dynasty 12, beginning the Middle Kingdom's golden age. To better control the nation, he moved the capital from Thebes to Ichtai, near the Fayum region, a strategic location between Upper and Lower Egypt. From here, Memphis was within reach, and Upper Egypt remained close enough to govern, turning Ichtai into the new political nerve center of Egypt. 330, a key difference under Amenemhat I was his effort to curb the power of the nomarchs, local governors who had once acted as petty kings and contributed to the fall of Dynasty 6. He gradually stripped them of power, replacing them with loyal officials and forming a centralized bureaucratic system. At the same time, Amenemhat I launched major infrastructure projects, especially in the Fayum, digging canals, reclaiming desert land, and turning it into fertile farmland. This was not just an economic endeavor, but also symbolic. If a pharaoh could control the Nile's flow, he could also control Ma'at, the universal order. The throne then passed his son, Senusret I, 1955 to 1911 BC. Notably, Senusret I co-ruled with his father for a time, a rare case of co-regency intended to prevent succession crises. This demonstrated the dynasty's pragmatic political thinking. Once in full control, Senusret I became one of the most militarily active rulers, launching multiple campaigns into Nubia, constructing a chain of fortresses along the Nile to control the gold mines and trade routes, and effectively turning Nubia into a vassal region. Not only a warrior, Senusret I was also the initiator of the rise of the god Ammonius in Karnak. He ordered the construction of the first major structures at the Karnak Temple in Thebes, foundations for a monumental complex that would reach its peak during the New Kingdom. The choice to elevate Ammonius, the Theban god of wind and sky, over Ra, the sun god of Heliopolis, also reflect a significant religious shift tied to the emerging center of power. Following the strong foundations laid by Amenemhat I and Senusret I, the Middle Kingdom entered a more stable phase under Amenemhat II, 1911 to 1877 BCE. While his predecessors focused on unification and military conquest, Amenemhat II pursued a path of diplomacy and trade. During his reign, Egypt expanded its commercial networks in all directions. Cedar wood from Byblos, incense from Punt, and precious stones from the Aegean. Inscriptions on stele record Egyptian fleets docking at distant ports, returned with luxury items such as silver, turquoise, and seashells, goods rarely seen in the Nile Valley. His court was marked not by war, but by prosperity and strong international connections, presenting an image of an Egypt thriving through peaceful exchange. His successor, Senusret II, 1877 to 1870 BCE, continued this path, but with greater focus on domestic development. This pharaoh is not remembered for grand battles, but for one colossal project, the reclamation of the Fayum oasis. He commissioned canals, managed the Nile's water flow, and transformed lowlands into fertile farmland, significantly expanding Egypt's agricultural base. Unlike his predecessors who clashed with nomarchs, Senusret II adopted a softer approach. Rather than stripping local lord to power, he sought cooperation, especially in agricultural projects. The result was a flourishing rural economy, greater food stability, and a period of national abundance born from a turn toward the fields. But this balance would soon shift under Senusret III, 1870 to 1831 BCE, one of the most powerful pharaohs in all of Egyptian history. He embodied the warrior king, the reformer, and later a deified protector. In stark contrast to his father's moderate rule, Senusret III launched a series of military campaigns into Nubia, rich in gold and ivory. To control the region, he built an extensive chain of fortresses along the Nile, from Semna to Buin, marking the first time Egypt maintained a long-term militarized southern border. Domestically, Senusret III was relentless in curbing the power of nomarchs, centralizing authority directly under the pharaoh. Local aristocrats were sidelined and replaced by royal appointees, establishing a firmly centralized state once again. His image left a striking impression in the world of art. Statues of Senusret III do not portray him as a youthful, divine figure, but rather with a weary face, sunken eyes, and tight lips. This was not a symbol of weakness, but a powerful message. The pharaoh was the one who bore the burdens of the entire nation, a man who suffered on behalf of his people. This artistic departure made him a more human and powerful symbol, so much so that he was later worshipped as a protective deity. The pinnacle of the Middle Kingdom is often associated with the name Amenemhat III, 1831 to 1786 BC, a ruler remembered by posterity as the great economic pharaoh of Egypt. He poured his efforts into massive hydraulic projects, especially in the Fayum region, where he ordered canals to be dug and lake beds cleared, turning Lake Moeris into a vast reservoir for regulating the Nile's floods. This swampy region was transformed into fertile farmlands, feeding tens of thousands of farmers. The project was more than a feat of engineering. It was a symbolic act. The pharaoh, by mastering the waters, also preserved the balance of Ma'at, the cosmic order. Under Amenemhat III, the Egyptian people experienced unprecedented agricultural prosperity. With the regulation of Lake Moeris and Fayum, along with an advanced network of canals, dikes, and water locks, Nile levels were effectively controlled. Farmers were no longer wholly dependent on the unpredictable flood cycle. Instead, they could now plant multiple crops throughout the year, rather than relying solely on a single post-flood harvest. This expanded cultivation area and caused crop yields to skyrocket. Egyptian farmers primarily cultivated emmer wheat and barley, the foundation for bread and beer, the two staple foods of Egyptian society. Thanks to the fertile soils of the Fayum, they also grew beans, sesame, vegetables, grapes, and figs, turning the region into a diverse and abundant breadbasket. Animal husbandry also flourished, with the raising of cattle, sheep, and goats providing meat, milk, hides, and wool. Notably, the reign of Amenemhat III witnessed major inventions and advancements. Large-scale irrigation engineering, water channels, sluice gates, and reservoirs were constructed, forming one of the earliest state-planned hydraulic systems in history. Improved agricultural tools. Wooden plows with copper blades and copper sickles replaced older flint tools, increasing productivity. One particularly ingenious invention was the shaduf, a long wooden pole mounted on a pivot, with a leather bucket or clay jar on one end and a counterweight of stone or clay on the other. With minimal effort, a farmer could pull down the bucket to draw water from a canal or the Nile, and the counterweight would lift it, allowing easy pouring into irrigation channels. Compared to manual scooping, the shaduf drastically increased irrigation speed and, more importantly, enabled water to be lifted above canal level, expanding farmland into previously dry regions. Standardization of measurements. The state regulated agricultural taxation using official measuring tools and centralized granaries. Evidence shows that land surveys were conducted regularly after each annual Nile flood. Improved mud brick quality. More durable bricks were used for canal linings, levees, and flood-resistant storage structures. With these transformations, Egyptians under Amenemhat III not only had food security but agricultural surpluses, positioning Egypt as a granary nation in the ancient world. Many scholars consider this period the most advanced phase of agriculture during the Middle Kingdom. Beyond agriculture, Amenemhat III expanded trade farther than ever before. Records mention Egyptian merchant ships docking in Byblos, Punt, and even on the island of Crete, returning with copper, timber, ivory, perfumes, and precious stones. This prosperity was mirrored in the scale of his constructions. He commissioned two pyramids at Dashur, the Black Pyramid and the White Pyramid. Though their engineering does not match the perfection of Giza, these monuments represent the ambition and administrative power of his reign. After his death, the throne passed to Amenemhat IV, 1786 to 1777 BC. Though his reign was short, he maintained the policies of his father. A few expeditions to Punt and Sinai are documented under his rule, though no monumental achievements have survived to define his legacy. He stands as a quiet bridge of continuity, ensuring that the kingdom did not fall into immediate decline after a golden age. In a surprising final transition, the throne passed to a woman, Sobonferu, 1777 to 1773 BC. She is the first female pharaoh in Egyptian history, confirmed by the historical record. an event that highlights a distinct phase in the royal court's evolution. Her brief reign left a mark through her devotion to the crocodile god Sobuk, protector of the Fayum, the very land her father had transformed into Egypt's agricultural heartland. She may be seen as the one who closed the circle of the 12th dynasty. It began with reclamation of the land and ended with a queen devoted to the god of that fertile region. After the death of Sobukneferu, the female pharaoh who brought the 12th dynasty to a close, Egypt entered a new era of instability known as the 13th dynasty, 1795 to 1650 BCE. If the 12th dynasty represented the pinnacle of the Middle Kingdom, then the 13th was its twilight, a slow descent into decline. Pharaohs came and went in rapid succession, many reigning for only a few years or even months. The Turin King list records dozens of royal names, yet most remain obscure, having left behind no significant monuments, military campaigns, or political achievements. This constant turnover severely weakened central authority. The nomarchs and provincial leaders, once tightly controlled under Senusret III, began to reassert themselves as regional lords, ruling their territories with near-complete autonomy. The royal court in the capital became a shadow of its former self, holding the title of pharaoh but lacking any real power. Despite the political disintegration, Egypt's agricultural economy managed to endure. Thanks to the irrigation systems and canal networks developed during the reign of Amenemhat III, the Nile's fertile floodplain continued to yield abundant harvests, sustaining the population. International trade still existed, though it was no longer as vibrant as during the golden years. Trade voyages to Byblos, Punt, or Crete became increasingly rare, as the weakened central government could no longer sponsor or organize large-scale maritime expeditions. The most noteworthy development of this era was not political, but religious and cultural. Previously, funerary rites and belief in the afterlife had been privileges reserved for pharaohs and the elite. But during the 13th dynasty, this belief became democratized. The coffin text, a collection of spells, prayers, and rituals guiding the soul through the afterlife, became widespread. These inscriptions no longer appeared solely in royal pyramids, but now also adorned the coffins of the wealthier commoners. The afterlife was no longer the exclusive domain of royalty, but had become a shared aspiration of all Egyptians. Yet, while religious thought expanded, reality grew darker. The fragmented state left Egypt increasingly vulnerable. By the mid-17th century BCE, nomadic groups and warriors from Asia, later known as the Hyksos, began infiltrating the delta, initially arriving as traders. They gradually took control, establishing a stronghold in Avaris, in Egypt's northern delta. With their dominance over Lower Egypt, the 13th dynasty officially collapsed, marking the end of the Middle Kingdom and the beginning of a new period of turmoil, the Second Intermediate Period.